Rally and reaction. President Trump greets his supporters and blasts Democrats in Ohio. Before leaving, the president answered our question about critical remarks from the head of the Archdiocese of Washington. Treaty with Russia. The United States ends an arms control agreement with Moscow. And true human development. Pope Francis releases his prayer intention for the month of August. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, August 2nd, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Mark Irons. President Trump holds out hope he can reach a nuclear deal with North Korea. The president's optimism comes despite more threatening missile tests and a break in diplomacy. And North Korea isn't the only country pushing back against the president. President Trump sent a series of tweets today defending his outreach to North Korea. He writes, Chairman Kim Jong-un will do the right thing because he is far too smart not to, and he does not want to disappoint his friend, President Trump. North Korea raised alarm when it launched another round of short-range missiles. But President Trump adds these missile tests are not a violation of our signed Singapore agreement, nor was there discussion of short-range missiles when we shook hands. North Korea had a chance today to meet with diplomats from the U.S., Japan, and South Korea on the sidelines of an Asian security conference in Bangkok. But North Korea was a no-show. Speaking to conservatives in Georgia, Vice President Mike Pence stands behind the president's foreign policies.
I mean, how great is it to have a president who's standing up for America on the world stage instead of apologizing for America to the world?
President Trump also rattled stock markets when he announced more tariffs on China. He said he's going to keep taxing the country until they agree to a trade deal.
They want to wait till they get, they're praying. They're praying. They would like to see a new president in a year and a half so they could continue to rip off the United States like they've been doing for the last 25 years.
At a rally last night in Cincinnati, President Trump also made headlines when he said America is on the verge of new breakthroughs in science and medicine. But this claim is leading to more questions.
There's never been anything like it. We will be ending the AIDS epidemic shortly in America and curing childhood cancer very shortly.
President Trump says Representative John Ratcliffe will no longer be nominated as Director of National Intelligence to replace Dan Coats. In a tweet, the president said the Republican representative from Texas has decided to stay in Congress. Questions about Ratcliffe's experience have dogged him since President Trump announced his candidacy 5 days ago. President Trump tells me he enjoys strong support from people of faith. I asked him about the Archbishop of Washington, who made critical comments about what he calls the president's divisive and disrespectful speech. The Catholic Archbishop of Washington said your words about some members of Congress and Baltimore may have deepened divisions in this country. What do you say to the Archbishop's words?
Well, I haven't seen the words at all, but I'll take a look at them. But I will tell you, the churches love me and I love them. You know, we got about 84% of the vote. And the churches love Donald Trump, and I love them.
The White House tells us the president was referring to white evangelical voters in 2016 when he used that 84% figure. Archbishop Wilton Gregory says President Trump denigrated the people of Baltimore. The Archbishop writes, we all need to reject racism, disrespect, or brutality in speech and action. Alveda King responds to Archbishop Gregory. The pro-lifer and niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says in a statement, we all need to acknowledge that Baltimore and other inner-city areas across our country have problems. It is not racist to acknowledge these problems, and President Trump is not racist for pointing them out. 8 Covington Catholic students sue lawmakers and journalists. They accuse Senator Elizabeth Warren, a New York Times reporter, and a CNN commentator of defamation. Correspondent Jason Calvi joins us from the control room.
Mark, another judge threw out a similar lawsuit against the Washington Post. The judge says the First Amendment protects the newspaper even if it prints erroneous opinions. This story erupted after the March for Life in January. A viral video showed what seemed to be a tense standoff between Catholic school students and a Native American elder.
This drumbeat in January sparked a national debate, and today it still echoes. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren in January claimed the Native American endured hateful taunts, and CNN commentator Anna Navarro tweeted, Native American elder taunted by racist MAGA hat-wearing teens.
Get no more than one person.
Now 8 of those teens and their families fire back. Lawyer Robert Barnes filed this lawsuit against 12 media stars and lawmakers.
We asked these people to correct, we asked them to retract, we asked them to apologize or delete. They refused to. And these are people with extraordinary platforms that reach millions and millions of people. So because they refused to correct and they refused to retract and refused to apologize, today 8 Covington kids filed suit.
Each student is asking for roughly $45,000 per defendant, the equivalent of 4 years of in-state tuition at the University of Kentucky.
All these families, they didn't seek out fame, they didn't seek out notoriety, they didn't seek out celebrity, and they're not trying to treat the lawsuit as a lottery ticket. They only want these individuals to pay a price that will reasonably deter future conduct like this.
The teen at the center of these videos, Nicholas Sandman, is not part of this lawsuit, and a court threw out his suit against the Washington Post.
The Post did print the correction we requested. We requested the Post put on its front pages that an independent investigation had completely cleared all of these kids of all wrongdoing. The Post did so. These individuals we're suing refused to do so.
A New York Times spokeswoman tells us reporter Maggie Haberman has not yet received the lawsuit, so they say it's entirely without merit, and they'll vigorously defend against it if need be. The reporter back in January tweeted this: "There are dozens of students laughing and egging on the behavior. Will be interesting to see if anyone is actually expelled." We'll be posting the other responses as we receive them from defendants on our Twitter page. Here in the control room, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
The Diocese of Pittsburgh has paid $4 million to around 24 abuse survivors. That's according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And in Oregon, a report says the Archdiocese of Portland is set to pay $4 million to 8 victims. The settlements come amid a worldwide clergy sex abuse scandal. The U.S. and Russia end a landmark arms control treaty. The 32-year-old agreement limited nuclear missile development. The Trump administration says the Kremlin was not complying with the pact. The U.S. plans to test a new missile in coming weeks. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is trying to defuse a brewing trade dispute between 2 U.S. allies. The top U.S. diplomat met with the foreign ministers of Japan and South Korea on the sidelines of a global meeting today in Bangkok. Tokyo removed South Korea from a list of countries with preferred trading status. In retaliation, Seoul says it may no longer consider Japan a friendly nation. An attack by al-Qaeda militants kills 20 soldiers in Yemen. The strike on a military camp set off violent clashes. The terrorists targeted forces being trained by the United Arab Emirates. It came one day after a pair of terror bombings in Yemen killed more than 50 people. Saudi Arabia published new laws today loosening travel restrictions on women. The law now allows all citizens to apply for a passport and travel freely without needing the consent of a man. It ends a long-standing policy that had controlled women's freedom of movement. And a Vatican diplomat says talks between Nicaragua's government and the opposition party appear to be over. The two sides are hoping to end a year-long political standoff. The Holy See official was informed of the news in a letter earlier this week. More than 300 people have died in the upheaval. Tomorrow, Pope Francis will meet with 5,000 Christian scouts who are hiking through Italy. On their way to Rome, members of the European Federation of Scouting visited Monte Cassino Abbey, the first monastery of the Benedictine order founded by St. Benedict. As they visit these historical sites, the boys and girls attend Mass and learn more about their faith. Joining us now is Alexandra Marhevich, who represents the gathering known as Euromoot. She has been reporting on stories from this year's hike and is a scout herself, as you can see. Alexandra, what is a typical day like for the scouts out on this hike?
Hi, Mark. I'm pleased to be here. Well, that's a good question, actually. I think that most typical thing would be for us to wake up with a prayer, usually actually singing a song which wakes you up basically with a good mood, but also feeling the closeness of God. Then we start up the road until we feel so hungry that we cannot walk anymore. And after some lunch, we have a prayer called An Hour of Light, a daily Holy Gospel reading, and we discuss it also with the priest, and we continue our route until we are so exhausted that we cannot walk anymore again, and we go to sleep.
It actually sounds amazing. How has the journey impacted your own faith?
Yeah, I think, the most impacting thing is the fact that we are so international. each unit is actually usually paired, or as you may say, twinned, with another unit from a different country. So say Polish people from Italians, people from Spain with Argentinians, or people from France. We are really international, and I would say we learn from each other, learn how to improve our faith, not only in a personal way, but I would say in a society as a whole. And that's what I find absolutely amazing.
Wow, it sounds a little bit like the Camino in Spain, which I got the chance to do last year. Now, the Scouts will be meeting with the Holy Father tomorrow. What would you like him to learn about this scouting experience, Pope Francis?
Well, I think, the most important for me is for him to know that we are the ones who are, let's say, we're not the couch potatoes, as he said in World Youth Days in Krakow, that he doesn't want the youth to be couch potatoes. He wants them to be people who, with their shoes laced and ready to go, ready to carry the word of God to everybody as they can. I think us, the Scouts, we are the perfect candidates for that, and I hope that he will see us and give us more jobs to follow the path of God.
Don't be a couch potato. Alexandra Marhevich, incredible story. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, an analysis of the bipartisan budget passed by the Senate and what it means for pro-lifers. President Trump signs a bipartisan budget. The more than $1.3 trillion deal features more spending for the military and increases the national debt. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell calls the plan a win for pro-lifers. A report in The Hill says McConnell praised Democrats for not trying to add pro-abortion measures to the budget. The proposal also left in place the Hyde Amendment, which bans federal funding of abortion. Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, joins me now. Rachel, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this. Mitch McConnell says it's a major win for pro-lifers. Fiscal conservatives like yourself say not so fast, and you have officially said it represents the funeral of fiscal conservatism. What makes you think there's no turning back?
Well, this deal ultimately undoes the gains of the 2011 Budget Control Act, which was the biggest win for fiscal conservatives in decades. This new bipartisan budget deal totally eviscerates those gains. So Congress is able to spend without limit for the next 2 years.
And I want to ask you, as President Trump said he would eliminate the national debt, what do you make of that?
Well, I think the White House went into these negotiations knowing they wouldn't get everything they wanted, because obviously Democrats are in charge of the House. But I think they were hoping Senate Republicans would have their back a little bit more than they did in these budget negotiations. The White House proposed $150 billion in savings that the Congress could take. Senate Republicans only took $70 billion of those, and they are not likely to take effect at all. So.
Before the vote, President Trump tweeted, "2-year deal gets us past the election. Go for it, Republicans. There's always plenty of time to cut." On that, how likely do you think cuts are going forward?
Well, Congress hates nothing more than a spending cut, so I don't think it's incredibly likely. I hope that there's some Senate Republicans who show some fiscal restraint in the upcoming appropriations process, but if history tells us anything, kind of unlikely.
And let's talk about now the pro-life side of this. It contains several pro-life measures, a commitment of the Trump administration. How do you think this deal works to help the president's re-election strategy?
You know, I think he's able to tout that he's working with Congress. You know, he hasn't really combated them on this issue. But I think from the pro-life perspective, it's important to make some distinctions here. This is a budget deal. It is not a spending deal. And so all we have right now between House Democrats and Senate Republicans and the president is a handshake agreement that they won't go after pro-life priorities in the future. We still have to do appropriations. Those are the spending bills. So that's going to be where the rubber meets the road in seeing if the Democrats are willing to keep their commitment.
Let's change gears here a little bit. The president says Texas Representative John Ratcliffe no longer is a candidate for the Director of National Intelligence. What do you think happened here? Why did he drop out, and what's going to happen going forward?
Yeah, John Ratcliffe, very highly qualified member of Congress, was nominated for the D&I position, withdrew after facing very, very stiff opposition from Senate Democrats who, you know, as of late now go after President Trump's nominees on a personal level. He didn't want to put his family through that. And increasingly, this is what we're seeing from Senate Democrats. They've taken the gloves off, and this confirmation fight, like any confirmation fight, would be too grueling, I think, for someone with young children.
And let me get you on this. We saw 2 nights of Democratic debate. What was your takeaway from the 2 nights? And who was the winner?
Well, I think Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders controlled the first debate. They refused the bait to turn on each other, and so I think you really saw their very far left, borderline socialist ideas come out in the first debate. The second night, not clear on who the winner was. I think Tulsi Gabbard had a very good standout performance. But my big takeaway is just how far to the left this party has swung from even where they were 5 or 10 years ago. The second night, they spent more time bashing Barack Obama as too much of a moderate than they did anyone else.
Okay, Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Up next, we hear from the author of a new book on the abduction of Christian schoolgirls by Boko Haram. And Pope Francis releases his prayer intention for the month of August. It has been a little over 5 years since the militant Islamic group Boko Haram abducted 276 girls from their school dorm rooms in Chibok, Nigeria. A new book is helping to tell their story. In Beneath the Tamarind Tree, journalist and former CNN correspondent Aisha Sasay shares the personal stories of several of the girls who were released, their time in captivity, and their determination to survive. Aisha Sasay joins me now. Aisha, thank you for coming in. You've covered this story for some time now. Why was it important to you to, put it in words in a book and come up with a title that you did as well?
Yeah, thank you for having me. For me, it was about going beyond the headlines. I covered it at CNN from the very beginning when they were taken in 2014 and was part of the team that won the Peabody for coverage of the Chibok girls. But for me, it was important that we move beyond just seeing them as nameless and faceless black girls, which I felt was as far as we got with the TV coverage. And I really wanted to draw out their humanity. And I felt in some ways, because this was a very difficult story to tell because of where it happened in the world, because it's a conflict zone, that we never got to know any of the girls. And I wanted to write that with this book.
And these girls, they were kidnapped in 2014 by Boko Haram, who did not approve of their formal education. And then while the girls were in captivity, they were pressured to denounce their faith, their Christian faith, and convert to Islam. What role did both of those things play?
Yeah, I mean, so Boko Haram, obviously an Islamic terror group whose name roughly translates in Hausa, the dominant language of northern Nigeria, as Western education is forbidden. They're not against all kinds of education, they're against secular education. So they had long made it a mission to say kids shouldn't be in Western educated schools, girls should go and get married and not gain an education. And when they took these girls into captivity, one of the key points of pressure was to get them to renounce their Christian faith. It is also worth remembering that Chibok itself is a Christian enclave in the predominantly Muslim north of Nigeria. So this community is the minority, but they'd always peacefully coexisted. When they took these girls into captivity, it became really a kind of mission of the men to convert them to Islam. And what was really interesting as I interviewed the girls for the book is how important it was that they held on to their faith. How some girls said, I was born a Christian, I will die a Christian. How some families have said in the past that if their daughters have indeed met their end in captivity, if they did that to stand firm with their Christian faith, they're okay with that.
And now 112 of these girls are still missing. What is the Nigerian government doing about this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and that's part.
And there's been more kidnappings, I understand.
There have been more kidnappings, and to be clear, Boko Haram had been kidnapping women and girls since 2009. What was staggering about this abduction was it was the largest abduction, 276 girls taken from a boarding school where they should have been safe. But Boko Haram has taken more girls. They took over 100 last year from Dapchi, which is in a neighboring state. The Nigerian government has been largely silent in recent times about what their efforts have been, and that's long been a problem that I have had great issue with, that the families feel completely abandoned, and all the families have to rely on is their Christian faith that their children will come back. And they say, one of the mothers said to me, God will make a way and my daughter will come back.
Many of the things you learned writing this book, I've heard you describe it as a love letter of sorts for the girls. What is the message that you want readers to take away when they read this?
Really what I took away from it, how faith is powerful, how, people say, how did the book change me? And I say it strengthened my faith, because in the midst of these girls being taken and their release, my mother had a catastrophic stroke and I had to navigate that and tell the story, and watching their faith close quarters, watching them worship. You know, they have morning and evening worship, and seeing how that faith held them together and kept them strong. It is really a testament to that faith. And I want people to know that, you know, for those believers, it can be what guides you, what keeps you strong, and what helps you overcome.
Wow. A powerful story indeed. Aisha Sasay, thank you for being with us. She's the author of Beneath the Tamarind Tree, A Story of Courage, Family, and the Lost Schoolgirls of Boko Haram. Thank you for taking the time to share your story.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Finally tonight, Pope Francis is praying for families in a special way this month.
Un lugar destacado en ellas para la oración personal y comunitaria.
In a video announcing his prayer intention for August, the Holy Father says families can be schools for authentic human development. He adds the best gift for the future is to fill the world with families. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Mark Irons. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.